while you're finding me the slide, for me to be able to just talk a little bit to that, let me just say, first of all, a thank you to Dr. Bhatia for the invitation. It came from a very formal bump into each other in a hotel lobby in Bangkok, so I appreciate it being here. I was, for my sins, the head of HR for India for HSBC a number of years ago, based here in Mumbai. So the theme of Back to the Future is a very appropriate one for me to come back to Mumbai after all these years. A couple of other comments. Just from seeing the start of the day and the dance routine, I haven't actually done the twist since 1966. But it was good to get back involved again. I'm sure you all enjoyed it as much as I did. Although I doubt if my wife sees the video, she'll have a few question marks about the reason for my visit here today. And I'll probably have to earn a few brownie points when I get back home. But one of the triggers that's on the list that you were given at the beginning of the day is one for me that is incredibly appropriate. And it's the one that says why HR fails in organizations. I don't use that terminology that strongly, but I spend a significant amount of my working life these days running either for individuals or intact teams or open programs on HR transformation, as is headed in the, in the outline. And what we're finding today, and what I certainly find from my experiences, is that as I travel around the world, and I spend a lot of time in Asia, in the Middle East, and Africa these days, and I'm at, 40+ countries, 50+ nationalities these days. The pace of progress of HR to its targeted achievement of servicing the business and making the business more, more successful. That pace of change and progress varies dramatically around the world. And in fact, you've just had an example of the fact that the pace of change is dramatically different around the world in the conversations that you've just had from the panel, because one of the challenges that was seen by a panel member was actually getting people into impactive HRBP roles and supplying the HRBP service. Now, that is still a challenge for many organizations around the world, but at the same time, there are other organizations that have, in many senses, ticked the box on HRBP services, worked out what it looks like, are working very closely with the business, and have now moved on to AI, predictive analytics, human capital trends, strategic advice and counsel, to the business. So ultimately, there are still today, 20 years in, and it is over 20 years still since Dave Ulrich, gave us the model. That there is still today significant challenges and significant differences in that progress towards achieving that business partnership in the eyes of the people who are actually receiving it, either from the business side, the organizational side, or from the people side. So, as someone who's been involved in that throughout their careers, and I've been doing this, as I said, for 20+ years, and I was very fortunate to go on the Michigan Business School program where Dave actually introduced his idea so many years ago, and so many people have now shaped it and added to it and built on it. And yet, we do have, as it says in the note that we were given this morning, organizations and HR departments that have not quite yet made it. So I'm not, as I say, as critical in my language of why it fails. I tend to work with teams more on, from the point of view of where have you got to on that journey? I use something called the HR progress continuum. Where have you got to on that journey? Where in the business's eyes have you achieved something that they are appreciative of and helps them be more successful? And what are the next steps for you? And obviously different teams, different individuals are at different points, on that journey. But the context for me, and I use this phrase, this HR progress continuum, the context for me is that despite Dave's best efforts, and he's still around and he's still trying to educate us, more and more and more, and so have a number of other sort of leading lights, we have to remember that this is thought leadership. It's ideas. It's fantastic thought leadership, and it's fantastic ideas. But in HR, we need to have people who, A, understand them, can interpret them, and more importantly, implement them in a way that actually has an impact on the success of the organization. And for me, for a variety of reasons, our administrative history, our mindset of, policy and forms and tools and things like that, we haven't always got past the fact that what does that really need to look like in practice? What capabilities do we need to be able to deliver that? What do we need to know to be able to make that difference? And so when I say I've spent 20 years involved in that, I've spent 20 years trying to work out implementation, trying to work out impact. Because despite Dave and others' best efforts in terms of the thought leadership they give us, despite the best efforts of some of the leading lights in industry and in business, who are very forward-thinking in recognizing that they can't deliver a business strategy without having the talent in place to be able to do it, and look at HR as the vehicle for delivering that talent, to get to employer of choice status, where people want to come and want to stay and have the experiences that ultimately allow them to deliver and to stay and deliver. All of those things are demands upon us to respond, to come up with solutions, to put in place a certain number of services and approaches that actually implement and impact the success of an organization. Now, fortunately, when I say that we're at different points of that journey, some of the leading organizations, some of the leading HR exponents have found many of those solutions. So as time has gone on, we've had more and more and more positive examples of what I would consider to be 5 key areas of HR that will answer the HRBP question, at least, that was raised earlier in the debate that you've just heard. So when I'm facilitating with teams and I'm facilitating with individuals, intact or open, and trying to get them to take the next step, it's really about recognizing what those 5 key areas might be. It's about recognizing what the capabilities you need to put in place and deliver those and really achieve the implementation that you want to achieve. Thank you very much indeed. That has just made my life a lot easier. Can you click it on one slide? Thank you. Okay, so this is my HR progress continuum. I actually like to walk and talk, so if anybody's also got a little thing where I could walk and talk, that would make life a little bit easier as well. I feel a bit static stood here. But let me just try and talk you a little bit through the slide to try and put a little bit more detail on what I've been trying to emphasize to you. So you can see there the HR progress continuum. So when I go in and I look at a team, and I'm trying to work with the team to get them to be the deliverer of impactful services that really help an organization succeed, I say to them they will be somewhere on this HR progress continuum today, okay? And unfortunately, yes, there are parts of the world, there are industries where I walk in, and unfortunately, we are still a long way towards the left in terms of administration, payroll, benefit administration, making sure in tune with labor law, etc. Important stuff, but it doesn't help the business win in the marketplace as much as perhaps we could. You can see as we move on that top line to walk, I can walk now. Can I move now? Okay, so as we move along, you can see in the middle there, you've got business partnership, partner advisor, and impactive service deliverer. Okay, so again, many organizations have moved towards that, have got things like very impactive strategic delivery through performance and development management programs. The problem about being in HR, when you start talking to people, and I do a lot of this, I do a lot of work on performance and development and being the vehicle for the delivery of strategic intention. The problem with doing that is you've got this HR label on your forehead. So when you talk performance management, a lot of people think you're talking about appraisal, okay? And you're not. You're talking about strategic implementation and strategic delivery. So more and more people, more and more organizations moving to what I would call somewhere around the middle. And then in later years, over the last 3 or 4 years, huge emphasis on data management, data interpretation, and even now with AI, predictive analytics. I'm the Dean of Management Studies for EIU in Paris, and I've just done the 2024 update on our MBA program, and I use 3 AI sites to try and look forward as to what people would be challenged with. It was slightly disappointing because it was almost the same as 2023, but there's a few things around that they were saying, hey, you really need to start looking at this because it's going to become front and center in terms of being a services that business is going to need. So you can see there's been a lot of thought leadership that might take us from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. But as I said earlier, along with the business putting pressure on us to get the talent to deliver strategy, it really was about what does that look like? Because honestly, for those people in the room, I'm probably older than most people in the room. I've probably been doing it longer than most people in the room. When that thought leadership and those leading business people started to demand that of us, we didn't know the answer. We didn't have the solutions. I was there. We had the sleepless nights. We had the scratching of the heads. We got grey hair very quickly or lost it completely. Because ultimately, we had only been doing, the administrative stuff, okay? And we really had to sit down and start working out what does this look like in practice. And as you can see, eventually, and I am talking about over a number of years, probably, a few people. There's a CIPD study about 4 or 5 years ago in the UK where they went and looked at 300 companies and said, who are your absolute leading HR practitioners who've got it, found it, and have got the key 5 solutions or even more? And they found 13 out of 300 who the business rated as having got it. So they would be at the far right-hand side now of the continuum. But the other, forgive me my math, the other 287 would be somewhere on that continuum, okay? So, we really did literally over a period of time run pilots, go up blind alleys, launch initiatives that worked and we learned from, launched initiatives that worked and that didn't work and we learned from. So ultimately, I still come back to, yes, there are certain things around from time to time that shape our focus and our attention as an employer of choice. Flexible working has just been mentioned, okay? As COVID brought flexible working back, in terms of the theme here, back to the future, okay? And it is something that we are very focused on at the moment. Many organizations are very focused. The generational shift in demand of where and how they work is quite considerable. We know we need to respond to that. But just to give you a context, the first job I ever had out of university, think about how long ago that was, okay, was on flexible working terms. It's not new, okay? There are solutions around that have been in place for 30, 35, and 40 years. Probably longer than I care to think about. So look, what we came up with over that 5, 10, 15-year period, we really started in the middle with performance management, delivering strategy. Okay, it became performance and development management as we got more and more focused on the capabilities that people needed in their various roles. Capabilities rather than competencies. We can have an argument about that if you want, but I tend to work in capabilities rather than competencies. We started with performance. Once that started to deliver strategy, once that started to differentiate people's performance contribution to the organization, we could start to then look at higher potential people in talent, and we could start to look at rewards differentiated by performance and potential. And that gave us a nucleus of starting to service the business in a way that had never been serviced before. Okay? And to be honest, just to again go back to the Mumbai experience of being here, we were doing that in HSBC in Mumbai in between 2006 and 2008. Okay? I'm sure many people in this room are now doing that, which means you're further and further and further down, you know, the progress continuum. What did we add to that? What did we realize? What did we get feedback on? And I personally got this feedback. I was in a relatively senior HR position with HSBC, and I had my first review after being appointed to, you know, a global position. And basically, the boss said, well, you know, you're not bad and you're okay and you're a pretty good implementer, but you're not very strategic. And I said, but I'm trying to work with, you know, the business strategy and stuff like that. I was trying not to make excuses too much. And he said, what I mean by that is I need to know what's coming around the corner from a human capital perspective. What are the trends? Why are people going to choose us in terms of being an employer or choose someone else? Why are they going to stay or go? Okay? Is there a difference between leadership and management? And if there is, are we implementing it? And are we picking the right leaders for the right reasons? And by the way, what's my senior succession planning look like? Because the last time I looked, we only had sort of 54% success rate in senior succession, and that affects our share price. So the one on the left, strategic advice and counsel, became probably the area that we can make most difference with a business's success. And that is about human capital trends, human capital management, and putting things in place for our business to manage these generational shifts, these changing demands, these factors that affect employer of choice. And on the far right there, I've got organizational design and development. We don't do much design these days. Everybody's flat and flexible and agile, or if you're not, you're heading in that direction. But development tends to be around values, mainly because there's been so many poor examples of organizational values. I mean, I worked in finance for 25 years. Some of you are old enough to remember the financial crisis. 2 days away from the whole of the banking system around the world collapsing. That was created by a lack of values. Emissions scandals with cars. Oil and gas digging to the point where, you know, they can't recover it when it goes wrong. You name it, we've had a lot of values scared. So organizational development through values, through engagement, and latterly, increasingly through diversity. And that obviously is playing out as a 2023, 24, and looking forward from a predictive analytics point of view, probably, you know, inclusivity, gender diversity, etc., are probably going to be major themes through the talent space and employer of choice space for as long as I'm going to be around. From that, the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've started to get a lot more data-driven, as I said, so we got into HR metrics. But what's interesting to me is I go into the States some of the time, and they are abandoning some of the metrics that we're just starting to do, let's say in Bangkok, where I live, because they've discovered that there are other ones that are much more important than vacancy gap or time to fill, you know, because we get very defensive about all the criticism that we get as HR people. So we run metrics to defend ourselves instead of metrics to help the business succeed, okay? And then finally, can we do the tie-up from the HR data to the business results? The answer is increasingly, and you hear me say that slowly, the answer is increasingly yes, but it's difficult. Deloitte's have done some great work on that in terms of the connection between engagement and reduced turnover. Gallup have done some really good work on productivity through willing commitment, through engagement. So there are more and more examples. Target in the US did some really good work trying to connect willing commitment to sales growth. It's almost there, but you can see that organizations are very, very interested in connecting, and we are a conduit to help them connect from human capital services, human capital impact to, you know, the bottom line. And again, it's a bit fledgling, but we're starting to get more and more examples of the fact that we can make a difference to the success of the organization. So that's 20 years and a look forward in sort of 25 minutes. I'll leave it there unless somebody has any questions that they wish to throw at me. Thank you very much for the invitation and for your time.